So I thought I would give a bit of an introduction about myself and about the reason why I'm doing these films. My name is Nicholas Breezewood. I live in Pembrokeshire, which is in the southwest corner of Wales, which is the country next door to England. It's kind of a beautiful place. It's quite wild here. There are lots and lots of ancient sacred sites. I guess probably within 20 or 30 miles of my house there are probably many thousands, certainly, probably tens of thousands of ancient sacred sites between about 4,000 and 6,000 years old. So it's a place of the ancestors. We've got stone circles and standing stones and all of that kind of stuff. I live in a tiny little village called Aberceich, which is at the end of a small river called Affonceich. And that is known as a sort of portal to the spirit lands for around about the last 1,000 years. There's an ancient medieval Welsh series of stories called the Mabinogion. And in the Mabinogion, Affonceich is where Prince Pwll of this area went out hunting one day, and he met the king of the spirit world as he crossed the river. And so the king came into this world and Prince Pwll went into the spirit lands, the land of the fairy, for a year. They both swapped places. So it's a place of portals, and it's an ancient place. And I kind of like that, that's kind of quite cool. Anyway, when I was about 16, the spirits started coming to me and trying to teach me, and I had real difficulty hearing them. Back then, that was pre-internet days. This is in the mid-1970s. No internet, no New Age bookshops, no interesting books and magazines about shamanism. I'd never even heard the word. I don't think many people had, unless they were kind of working in a university library or something. So I had no frame of reference, and it was difficult, and I couldn't really understand what was going on. In my mid-20s, early mid-20s, I worked as a social worker, and I worked in a mental health day centre, and I started to train as a psychotherapist in a large psychiatric hospital nearby where I lived at the time. And some of the psychotherapy work that I became involved in, some of the training was a little bit on the fringe side. Most of it wasn't. Most of it was very orthodox, but there were, the odd excursion into some less charted areas. And some of that was about shamanism and about the medicine wheel teachings of the Native Americans as well. And that kind of triggered my whole kind of connection with everything that had happened to me as a teenager. And so in my later mid-20s, around about 1985, 1986, I met my first human teacher of Native American traditions at the time. And I came back from that with my eyes going round and round in circles and said to my partner, I think my life has just changed. And I knew at that point that I had to somehow, by hook or by crook, make shamanism, the medicine ways, the sacred life, for want of a better way of putting it, what I did 24/7. And so from that point, that's what I set out to do. And so for, well, where are we? Getting on for 40 years, 35, 36, 37 years, whatever it is. That has been my day job, researching shamanism, working with medicine people, exploring the whole kind of thing about it, and since 1993 publishing and editing Sacred Hoop magazine, which has been a tremendously good way of learning because of all the interviews and all of the people that I've met and all of the wonderful articles that we've had in all of those years about shamanism. Sacred Hoop magazine is a quarterly international magazine about shamanism and animism and indigenous spirituality, and it's still going strong. So my life has been totally geared around either psychotherapy and the whole kind of personal growth side of that, and shamanism and medicine teachings. And so it's kind of what I have gone into completely. I can't imagine another sort of life, really, if I'm perfectly honest. And I think I'm pretty unemployable. I'm quite badly dyslexic, and when I was at school, dyslexia had not really been invented, so to speak. So I wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia until I was an adult. So school life was not the best time of my life. Let's put it that way. During the time of Corona in 2020, I got my spirits knocking me on the shoulder, and they started to say, put some teaching videos and some songs and various other things up on Facebook. And these films have kind of stemmed from those. They were a way at that point of kind of giving some positives to the community and people in lockdown that were having a hard time. So I started doing daily sessions of teaching people some simple Lakota medicine songs that had been taught to me in the mid-1990s by an Oglala teacher, Edmagar Eagleman. And so it felt appropriate, and in fact I was asked to do some more videos and to put out some bits and pieces. So that's why I've set up this YouTube channel. And in this YouTube channel I'm going to be sharing little videos of medicine teachings and shamanic teachings from the three cultures that I work with. Now, I work and combine three different traditions, and there's a synergy in all of those traditions. There's a great overlap in the kind of the qualities of them. But those three traditions are the first one that I became involved with, which was Plains culture, Native American. So we're talking about cultures like the Lakota, the Crow, the Arapaho, the Cheyenne. And the cultures of Tibetan Buddhism and the cultures of Mongolian and sort of northern Eurasian shamanism, or southern Siberian shamanism too. Now those cultures are all in some respects similar. They all live in big landscapes. They all have a big sky above them. They all have an animistic and, in the case of Mongolia and Tibet, a shamanistic tradition. And there's a lot of parallels between them. Now, for me, I have found ways to weave those three paths together into a sort of plait, like a plaited rope. And that's how my practice is. My practice is a mixture of those three things. And so that's what I'm going to be teaching here on these videos that I put out. People ask me sometimes if I'm a shaman, and that's always a very difficult one. The Native American traditions say that the medicine people don't kind of own it. They don't claim themselves to be medicine people, and it's considered bad form. You know, if somebody is kind of proclaiming themselves to be a medicine man or something, you know, they're generally not, and it's not a good policy to be around them very often. That is not the case in shamanism in Mongolia and Tibet. If you're a shaman in those cultures, or whichever word those cultures use, because actually neither of them use the word shaman traditionally. In Tibet it would be a lapa, in Mongolia it would be a kam or a bu. And if you are one of those, then it's perfectly okay to say that you are. My friends from those cultures, traditional shamans, they say that I am, but I think they're probably being very generous because they know far more than I do. So I think they might be humouring me and being very kind. So I'm not going to say that I'm a shaman here, but I am going to say that I practice old school shamanism, and I hold and have traditional teachings and initiations into these practices. And it's very real for me. It is what I do, and I hold the traditions very dearly. They are beautiful traditions, and I work with them as traditionally as I can in my house in West Wales, which is not the steppes and not the Great Plains and not the Himalayas, but it is where I am, and I practice where I am, and my community is wherever my community come from. So I hope you enjoy the videos that I'm going to put out. They're going to be all sorts of bits and pieces. If you want to know more about Sacred Hoop magazine, you can find its website, sacredhoop.org. I also do an audio podcast called Three Worlds, the Shamanism podcast. I've been doing that for several years, and I ramble on about different aspects of shamanism and animism and things like that on those. I don't teach workshops very often. I live in quite a way out place in many ways. I do work with people on an individual level. Occasionally I teach, but not very often. People find me out if they want to kind of work with me. They kind of tend to come, and that's kind of the way I like it. How I practice is what I tend to call kitchen table shamanism, because this is the way that I live. I don't want to get involved in the whole kind of workshop scene of hiring venues and all of that, because for me that can be a bit fake, a bit false, a bit like having a nice weekend in the country and then going back to people's normal lives. This is my normal life. I work like this, I live like this. My shamanism is kind of done around the kitchen table, as it were. And for me, that's real. That's keeping it real. So what I'm going to be giving in these videos is going to be traditional stuff. It's not going to be nice new age things. I'm not going to be talking about quartz crystals and chakras and, it's going to be kind of real stuff. And what I often say to people is that real shamanism isn't nice. It isn't polite. It can be tough stuff. I'm very open about what I do, to a degree. You're going to see me talking about lots of things on these videos, but don't get thinking that that's everything, because there are lots of teachings that I'm not able to teach openly in this way. So I always think of myself as kind of like fairly hard with a soft shell. So some of what I do is available, but there gets to be a certain level where then it's not available unless people are working with me and I'm teaching them properly. But I hope to be able to teach lots of things that I can teach in these films. So I really hope that you enjoy them, and thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this one and hear me rambling on, and I hope you enjoy the rest of them too. Okay,